We're back, people, and today we're going to film on Artie Burns, Miami Dolphins corner. They just had him in free agency, and to me, he's like purely a depth option. He's one of the signings that, might not even make the team. He is a 10-year veteran, former first-round pick out of Miami, actually. There was some interesting things on tape. Like, I wasn't actually planning on making a video at first, but watching him, there was some things that I didn't expect. Him playing nickel primarily the past 2 seasons. He's mostly played as a nickel corner, which I didn't expect from, the last time I had watched Artie Burns. He's a guy that has really good length. Like, his length is like high-end length, arm length. Likes to play with some physicality. He has good long speed. Like, he's a good linear athlete. I think where he gets into trouble is he's not the most fluid, most change of direction guy. It's just where he can lose routes sometimes covering out in space. But, like, he had a really good game. He only played 50 snaps last year. But last year when he covered Deebo Samuel, he actually kind of locked Deebo down on his targets against him. But he's willing to get physical, and I think him being a potential nickel actually gives him a better chance of making the team, because a lot of the Dolphins' backup corners right now are more boundary guys that can play on the outside, while Burns can potentially do both for you. I think you get when he has to cover out in space and guys do those like horizontal breaking routes, that's when he can kind of lose. But you get him in press situations. Very long arms, very willing to get physical, can play underneath. But yeah, I would say he's pretty 50-50 as of right now, just based on the roster of sort of making the team. We'll see what they kind of add around that. But he is a veteran, and I would say another thing that kind of helps him is he played last year in the same system pretty much, coming from the Seahawks with Mike McDonald, who is running a very similar scheme to Anthony Weaver. So he should have some experience, get up to speed right away. So yeah, we'll look at this first play. Here he is on a fade covering Deebo, and he's on the the inside of this bunch, and he's got to work around this trash. He does a good job here of staying square, staying patient. And I think he does a good job when he is playing more of like in an off man coverage or a zone where people have to work into it. If they are like either breaking straight in front of him or working vertically, he can carry those pretty nicely. And here he does a good job. When you're in this position, he has upfield shoulder positioning right here. So he understands like where he is on the field. He's down in the red zone. He understands like I'm upfield shoulder. They're going to probably try to throw this ball back shoulder to Deebo. So he turns into the receiver to find the ball. So good understanding of how to, turn and locate. And then go up and play through and knock that ball down. Use his length to his advantage. Because you can see he has really long arms. And like those long arms definitely can help him in press man and also just at the catch point to make some plays. Here he is pressing Deebo at the line. Deebo tries, break away, and he's just in the hip pocket pretty quickly. This is where I think, covering a decent receiver, Deebo's not more, honestly, kind of a running back playing receiver, but like in press, like he can cover guys to this caliber. But, get him against tougher guys on the outside, it will be maybe a different challenge, especially when he's out in space. But stays in the hip pocket, good job, has the speed to carry him, stick with it stride for stride. Doesn't have to, when he's like pedaling and then has to like hard change direction, open his hips, then flip back open, that's where he can get in trouble. But just straight out of press from square to chasing horizontal, he can make a play like that. So decent job there for Burns. Some decent anticipation. They try to sell this route. He has to motion across with the receiver. He does a good job showing some route recognition to break on this. Gets probably a little handsy there, but uses that length to, get back in position because, usually when he has to change directions like this, it can be more of a struggle. But you can see he uses the hands to help him stay in a position. Almost comes away with an interception, actually. The ball ends up skipping right on the ground, but he almost ends up getting that pick. Underneath zone, I like this because this is easier transition. He doesn't have to, like, mirror and match someone, so when it's a little bit harder to stay with them in these spots. But when he can play top down and he just reads the QB's eyes and they're just throwing it to the flat and he can just play, run in basically a straight line to get downhill, he'll make a play because he has pretty good straight line speed. And he's willing to get physical. Look at that, like tackle. The long arms help him, make these tackles out in space as well. Because even if he doesn't take the perfect angle, he can trip people up with those long arms, but goes through the tight end in this situation. So playing as like an underneath zone flat defender because looks like, Seattle's playing in like quarters look here. So they have, 4 deep, 3 underneath, and he's got the flat, and he closes pretty nicely. So solid closing burst there. Here he shows some recovery ability, gets flipped around. If this ball is probably thrown with better anticipation, it gets completed. But even then, he's able to get back into his spot pretty quickly. If that ball is thrown, inbounds, he probably gets the pick. But Garoppolo was late to release that one. But it's nice to see at least some recovery ability, because sometimes he does take himself out of position with his hips, either opening it too early, or not anticipating correctly. But he does have like the length, long speed, where I do think he could still play on the outside. It was interesting to see him play in the nickel, and it was like that. Like the 50 snaps he played this past season, he played in the nickel, and then for Seattle before that, he was playing mostly nickel stuff, which I thought was interesting. But here, when they do try to hit him with these routes, like down in the red zone, he can be a good threat. Here on Debo again, maybe he gets a little handsy, but like he does it within like that sort of 5-yard range mostly. It gets a little deeper down the field for it. But if he can use his length to disrupt and stay in the hip pocket, it does allow him to be a little bit better on these, change of direction, horizontal breaking routes to stay in the hip pocket. Doesn't allow Debo to separate down low, which is interesting seeing him play in the nickel. But I would say carrying vertically, like slot fades, like whenever they did the slot fade, especially versus press, he did a good job, mixing up hand usage. He shoots that outside hand, but you really want to shoot your inside hand. So he's able to use independent hands, flip back to his inside hand, which allows him to open up his hips. Because if you shoot your outside hand, it kind of locks your hips from opening to the outside. So now he's able to open his hips to the outside, and then carry this down. And then good job turning back into the receiver again. Because when you're upfield shoulder positioning, so like he can carry you vertically. He does a good job on these vertical routes. To then now turn back into the receiver, and then he sees play through the hands of Adam Thielen, knock that down. So that's a really solid job by Artie Burns on that specific play. He's also willing to get involved versus the run. I wouldn't say he's like a high impact run defender, but he has like the length, to beat blockers. Like here, he's kind of shoves off the receiver on him. He's willing to throw his body into the mix. Wouldn't say he's like a high instinctive run defender. That's not really his game, but he is definitely willing to get involved. But this is where he can get in trouble, when he's kind of caught either flat-footed, or he's caught like, kind of getting a little bit of depth, maybe opening up his hips, and like the receiver gets this full head of speed of momentum, and they just give him like these breaks either inside, outside. He doesn't have like that quite transitional skills to cover it. Like here versus Demarcus Robinson, just late. He does have the speed to get back to at least make the tackle, but he will lose those routes, particularly like that. I think he's fine on your roster purely as like a low end depth guy at this point in his career. Here he is blitzing, shows some closing speed, good feel. Come off the edge, kind of disguise this. Didn't blitz too much, but it seemed like when he did, he had a decent feel for it, and he's able to close some ground. Interesting. It's just interesting to see his body type, because typically his body type is almost strictly played on the outside. So him playing in the nickel is very, very interesting. Here, Juwan Jennings kind of gets him on a third down completion. As I was saying, just sometimes when he has to pedal and transition, it's not the cleanest. And it's not like, he loses this rep so badly or anything. He's just not able to quite have the anticipation or reactive athleticism to get downhill to make a play consistently on those types of routes. And it just gives up the third down conversion. But if it's kept a little more clean, like he's opening up his hips, and when he opens up his hips, the route is breaking towards the way he opens up his hips, he can carry across horizontally like this. He has the speed and vertical ability. He shows, decent anticipation to stay in the hip pocket, this time on Demarcus Robinson. So when he's kept like that, he can make a play on the horizontal breaking routes. But there's other spots where he can kind of have some tough, here he gives up the completion to Tutu, but doesn't necessarily get like destroyed off the ball. Like it's only a few yard completion. It's just another sort of scenario where, Artie Burns can have a little, that's typically just where he's giving up his catches. Even though here, like, it's more less he's not out in space as much. I think, him being at least in the press position gives him a better chance of making a play, and he, is able to make that tackle. It's only a few yard gain, so it's still not really a negative rep from him. And he does at least break decently out of there on that quick out route. But here's another example of just getting taken out of position. Robinson breaks him to the outside. He gets slightly out, and he's not able to transition or recover, change direction. Like, look at his body positioning there. Not exactly where you want to be for Burns. Doesn't get the target, but not a great spot for him to be there. Um, Here's actually a pretty good rep from Burns. Just staying over the top. When he's able to stay over the top on these routes, he does a better job. Especially they work towards him. He's able to actually mirror and match this one a lot better, and he's able to just play downhill and make a play at the catch point. So I think this one that's clearly just kept in front of him, and going against maybe not as high a tier of a receiver, he's able to make that play, and that was like a 4th and short too, big kind of stop for him. Him and Adam Thielen actually had an interesting battle in the slot. We'll see one of him losing to Thielen later, but he's actually able to stop a horizontal breaking route because he has the clear leverage. Even look how far he has outside leverage on this route. He still almost does kind of get beat, but he's able to at least, even though the transition isn't super smooth, since he does have the leverage, he's able to at least be in a decent spot to where that throw would have to have been perfect for it to be completed down the field. But as I'm saying, when he's playing as a flat defender, he does a really good job of closing, taking away here, to the running back. Actually, gets that ball to be knocked up in the air. He had that tackle earlier. This one is able to hit the running back as he's getting the ball. He has a pretty good feel for those types of plays. But I'm saying horizontal breaker. I mean, this one's more of a deep over route. He has the outside leverage on an inside breaking route. He's probably going to lose that. He thinks he has some inside help. But it's more of that vertical inside help gets kind of taken out, and he loses in that spot. It's just the more space I think he has to cover, the more trouble he can be in, which is very interesting, considering that he's playing mostly nickel. You wouldn't think that would be his strengths, but he shows some decent reps there. And here he's just showing a decent football intelligence. Understands this receiver's not coming up to slow and use this block on him for no reason. He knows he doesn't have to chase this. If it is a sweep, he's not going to make an impact play around the line of scrimmage anyways, and he's probably not going to get there to make a tackle until he's basically in the end zone. So he understands just stay patient. Once he sees it's the reverse, use that length to your advantage to shed that block, create that space, now get to the outside half, and then be patient, make a tackle. Good work there from Burns. So for me, I think he's a depth guy that has a chance of making a team. That's why I ended up making a video. I wasn't going to until I was he does have a chance, so might as well make a video just in case he does, just to showcase some of the strengths and weaknesses. So if you guys really do much, comment, subscribe,